Well, it is unhinged, but it's mostly cringe. CNN is once again bemoaning the male gaze. Such a blast from the past. It's really pretty incredible to see this headline at CNN. They say, after years of progress on gender, the male gaze is back. Madeline Holcomb is the writer, and she says, in the past decade, I saw evidence of progress in my media diet. The movies, shows, books, and advertisements I consumed were increasingly giving women a seat at the table. As if that wasn't before, whatever. Heroin chic fell away, and body positivity entered the fashion world. Stories about a woman stealing your man were traded for celebration of the girl's girl who resisted the competition for men's attention. It seemed like women were taking a deeper breath without such heavy cultural restrictions. Then there was a shift. Whatever the catalyst, a change in the political environment seemed to connect with a social change that brought back narrow and at times constrictive ideas of womanhood depicted in media. The rise of weight loss medications coincided with social media influencers sharing ways to get smaller and no longer celebrating bodies of all sizes. Advertisements followed suit, making men's desire once again a dominating factor in how stories are told and how women are portrayed. How had these discarded ideas made their way back into circulation? Didn't we all agree we were through with them? The culprit, I have learned, is the male gaze. It was always there, but now it has stepped back into the spotlight. All right, so later in the article here, she quotes activists who are telling her that traditional beauty standards put forward by the male gaze are unrealistic and usually prioritize whiteness. So that's nice. I just wanted to say at the outset, this article is really long. I mean, it goes on forever. And also, I found the entire thing crazy patronizing. This woman is not upset that women are being forced into a box, because obviously we're not. The latest Disney film that just came out has like a main character Asian girl boss and no romance. And so, you know, this stuff is getting tired, actually. But that's another discussion, maybe, or maybe Jim can take that in a bit. She's upset that there is a visible alternative to her idea of femininity at all. She is upset that women are choosing and are attracted to and celebrating publicly lifestyles that she doesn't like. Calls to mind something that a feminist activist, Simone de Beauvoir, once said, which was, no woman should be authorized to stay at home and raise her children. Society should be totally different. Women should not have that choice, precisely because if there is such a choice, too many women will make that one. And she was right. And this author is beginning to sense that, and it's making her panic. So, AnneMarie, as fellow female on the panel here, what was your take on this article?
Oh my goodness. You know, the last place we should be looking for guidance on living the good life is the popular culture. You know, we live in a very secular and confused popular in a world. And this is why we have this pendulum of constantly changing trends. You know, first it was girl power, then it was the trad wife. She's upset about the male gaze, the female gaze. I mean, it's just part of our nature, first of all, to be attracted to the opposite sex. And the problem arises when we objectify the opposite sex. Thank you, mass media, for doing that in the advertising industry. I mean, they're always tempting us with that. And, you know, because they know that's how it gets our attention. I mean, our culture is always trying to convince us that we are in charge. We're in charge of our sex. We can be Wonder Woman, women warriors, maternal fathers, nurture and can nurture and cuddle children in the same way that women can. You know, we need to start looking above, not at the culture to define us and to figure out what is a good and orderly life.
Yeah, I think one of the craziest parts of this, Jim, is that she's implying that, like, now that there is a popular surge of, you know, the trad wife thing on Instagram and stuff, or, you know, popular magazines like Evie that promote, you know, more traditional values and stuff, that the mere existence of these things is proof that, like, we're going back to, I don't know, probably a time that frankly didn't exist quite to the extent that they say that it did, but that women are being put in a box. And now that this stuff is forward in the mainstream culture, in advertising and stuff, you know, the Sydney Sweeney ad is one of the ones that she was particularly upset about. that this is proof that we're what's the word I'm looking for? The pendulum is swinging back too far, and now we're all going to be forced to stay home and never go anywhere again. Like it's crazy. She talks like there isn't still this huge push in media, especially liberal media, to promote the idea that oh, a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle kind of situation, right?
Yeah. Well, radical fourth wave feminism used to be confined to the craziest college campuses. I mean, I went to college between 1988 and 1992, and I went as an English writing major. And my first writing class actually was cross registered with the women's studies department. So I had to read and write essays on radical leftist feminists like Andrea Dworkin, for instance. That's one of the names that just pops into my head. AnneMarie might remember who that is. People of a certain age might remember. Certainly people in our audience might. But the point of the instructor, who was male, by the way, was to try to teach me how to write like a woman. And I found that odd even at 18 years old. It's like, how does a woman write? I don't know. And how could I ever know? Because I am not a woman and I will never have the female experience because I am a man. And men and women, and especially if you're going to put that in college, you're saying that they're different, right? Because I have to learn how to write like a woman. Wasn't able to do that. But and that kind of crazy radicalized, radical feminist outlook on the world was fine when it was confined to a women's studies department, at my alma mater, University of Pittsburgh, because it wasn't really infecting the real world. We have found in the last 10 or 15 years is that our popular culture and our politics is now driven by radical leftist feminism, intersectional feminism, and all of that. This article is very long and there's so many funny parts. We could probably do the whole hour just picking apart different parts of it. But you read part of the one that stuck out at me, Linnea, and was like, didn't we all agree we were through with this stuff? This stuff meaning normal, normal life and normal pop culture and normal portrayals of heterosexuals of the opposite sex who might show some interest in each other. No, we did not all agree that we're through with that. But Hollywood decided that they were. If you think about it, a lot of this goes all the way back to the Me Too movement, right? Harvey Weinstein, a disgusting human being, rightly called out finally after decades of abusing women in Hollywood and his position in Hollywood for sexual favors. And that Me Too movement suddenly became applied to everything in society, which was an enormous overreaction, to the point that, Linnea, you and I talk about this from time to time privately in chats and other things about how, romance is gone. I mean, if you think about the Star Wars sequel trilogies, I guess it happened at the very end of the last sequel, but there's no romantic spark between Rey and any of her co-stars. We can't have that, see, because if there's romance, then that diminishes, supposedly, this is not the way I think. This is the way radical leftist feminists who run Hollywood think. If you allow her to have romantic interest in one of her male characters, that diminishes her. No, it doesn't. It makes her human and relatable to the audience. But you can't have even a hint of romance with Rey and any of her co-stars. In this article, just states as fact that the Sydney Sweeney American Eagle ad was controversial. No, it wasn't. It wasn't controversial to normal people. It was controversial if you are a brainwashed radical leftist feminist. Then it's controversial. Like this entire, I don't know, what is it? Probably 10,000 word article on the male gaze and how we thought we were beyond that. Look, without the male gaze and the female gaze for that matter, Gaze, by the way, without that, the human species dies out. Okay, can we just be okay with that? It's actually fine to show and even celebrate, heterosexual romantic love. When was the last time a good romantic comedy was made? I mean, I know actually, ironically, Sydney Sweeney was in one of the last romantic comedies probably to make money in the last 2 years. Not a lot of people saw it. But again, as somebody who grew up in the 80s and 90s, there were 24 romantic comedies released every year. And some romantic comedies are considered classics going all the way back to the 1950s. And it's because it was an idealized representation of how people would actually like to go through their life. They would like to meet cute, their future husband or future wife. It's a very romantic and aspirational kind of depiction on the screen. But Hollywood is not interested in that anymore. They're interested in pushing ideologies. They're interested in portraying women as only strong and bosses and in control of everything, never depending on anybody else, especially a man, for anything in any movie. It almost never happens. And what you've seen is that Hollywood's box office is spiraling into the sewer. I think I saw a story the other day. The biggest layoffs in Hollywood's history have happened over the last, I think, 1 quarter or 20% of Hollywood writers and producers and people basically what they call below the line, not the stars. Huge layoffs and all of that stuff because they are failing, because they fail and refuse for too long, have refused to give audiences a fair, accurate, and idealistic depiction of human interactions between the sexes in a normal, heteronormative way. Using these sorts of terms, I know triggers like the woman who wrote this article, but that's just the way life is. That's what people want, and there's nothing wrong with it. Again, didn't we agree we were all through with this? None of us agreed to that. Only you did, and now your delusions are fading away, and you find that you're all alone. Was that the author on the screen there?
Well, no, I don't know what this is. Yeah, well, and Chris and Sam, if you guys want to jump in here too, love to hear your thoughts on this one because it is kind of crazy. That's not the author. I've seen pictures of the author.
You know what that looks like to me? It looks like a fat version of Ghislaine Maxwell.
Anyway. This is an economic phenomenon. The rise of DEI and the takeover of Hollywood by particular groups of people that were supposed to represent supposedly unrepresented voices took over. And the movies went into the pits. Nobody could make any money doing this. And the reality has struck back. And interestingly enough, it does come after we had a bit of a slowdown in the economy. The author of that piece makes the point that in the 1920s, women were so free and so psyched up and everything. And then in the 1930s, oh my gosh, it was terrible. Well, what was it? In the 1920s, everybody was free, everybody was psyched up, and everybody was being a bit irresponsible. And then after the stock market crash and the onset of the Great Depression, everybody became much more conservative. That is the way it works. When there's a lot of easy money, people act out. And when you take that away, they have to get practical. Now, the main thing here, though, is that the essential thought that this woman has is really the foundation of modernity, which is the notion that every human being is a tabula rasa, a blank slate, and whatever happens to them in their lives will determine everything that they will do. So her thinking is that, well, there's no such thing as a male or female coming out of the womb. It's just however you treat them, whatever you do with them. So you can take a male and give it all the right treatment and all the right, let's say, propaganda and punishments, and turn that gaze elsewhere. I don't know, maybe again to as Jim alluded to, some other kind of gaze. I don't know, but the point is that we're not tabula rasa. We know that, and it gets proven every time you try to make human beings into something that they aren't. And this is just another hilarious lesson in that, and I'm enjoying it.
Well, I think one of the things that's really amusing, kind of Jim alluded to it earlier, is that a lot of the people that she leans on for this article, I mean, she pulls 5 or 6 university professors to comment on this, and they're all just quoting stuff that we've all heard before 1,000 times. They're mad that there was a Carl's Jr. ad with a woman sharing bare arms or something in it. They're mad at Harrison Butker, of course, which is crazy because one paragraph. So she writes, Kansas City Chiefs player Harrison Butker spoke at a college commencement in 2024 and told the women that they have been told lies about their futures and probably were more excited about being wives and mothers than taking on careers. Okay, and so he frames this like that's not true. One, and then goes on to say, however, those voices are being met with other perspectives, men advocating that sharing the mental load of running a household is part of being in a family, or that protecting and providing includes supporting your wife and caring for the emotional well-being of those you love. Men can be strong, good listeners and be of service to their family. Men who can take care of themselves and aren't just good adults, they might be more attractive to women. Okay, nothing that Harrison Butker said was not that. Like, Harrison Butker and his wife probably have a far more balanced and, like happy home life than somebody who has to make like an actual chore list for their husband and who is mad at him for not emptying the dishwasher or loading the dishwasher the right way or whatever it is. Like, and look, we all have our way to load the dishwasher, but literally me. But she's like created a straw man of him in order to fight him when there's nothing that Harrison Butker said that's remotely controversial, if you're sane. Anyway.
I'm just going to go in a slightly different direction here. So I can't help myself but always view things through a historical prism. And when I think back, the human experience for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years, women were the caretakers, men were the providers. That is deeply ingrained within our DNA. You cannot just snap your fingers and say, well, in the 1970s, we're just going to say that now everything that's been part of our civilization for thousands of years, we're just going to erase that. And I'm not saying that women and men are not equal, but they're different. They're different for very fundamental reasons. I was lucky enough, my mom was, home, during my childhood. And this whole notion of women should join the workforce and, two-income households. I mean, I think that is having a profound negative impact on the country. And, there's so many different aspects of this that we can go into. But to me, it's just like, just simple common sense stuff. Men, for better or worse, are supposed to provide for the family. Women, for better or worse, are supposed to make sure that the household and the kids have everything that they need.
Yeah, let me just say something real quick. We can maybe move on, but that division of labor, and you alluded to this, Linnea, that kind of division of labor between a husband and a wife that she describes, and I think the implication here was that that's not the kind of life that Harrison Butker or anybody who has a trad wife would actually live.
Yeah.
And it's completely that's not the case. I mean, there's the old cliche that, liberals don't understand conservatives at all. But conservatives tend to understand where liberals are coming from because we're just, swimming in their cultural milieu our entire lives in every aspect of our life. But, this leftist, feminist, radical feminist viewpoint of relationships is that a relationship is a competition and that there's a winner and a loser and that the women have been coming out on the losing end for far too long. And haven't we all agreed we're through with that? That is so toxic and incorrect. I mean, the division of labor that was described in that thing absolutely almost perfectly describes my family and home life. My wife and I, there are blue jobs and there are pink jobs. We joke about it, and there are certain things that I do around the house that I don't want her doing, or there's no reason for her to do it. I'm better at it, repairing around the house, things like that. And there are things that she does. I can also do them and do also do them, but we have a cooperative, obviously we're very happily married. We have a cooperative home life. And this whole idea that it takes a radical feminist viewpoint to correct something that isn't even a problem is why there's such a problem here and why there's such a disconnect between articles like this, the viewpoints of the radical left, and the real life that everybody around them actually lives.
So yeah, I agree with you that there's a leftist cultural part of this, but I also go back to the Obama years when it was the life of Julia, and I vividly remember that the the theme of that was, you don't have to be dependent upon a man. You can be dependent upon the government. The government will supply you everything you need, your health care, your groceries. I think that's also a big part of this. And Sam, you and I have been talking about 1971 and, getting rid of the gold standard here. And when you look at the two income, trap, it really did start around that time because, so many women did have to enter the workforce. And what did that do? That I'm not saying that that's a bad thing at all. But when you're forced to do that just to make sure that you can, sustain your family, I feel like that is, something that many women probably don't necessarily want to do, but feel that they're forced to do. And when I was teaching, I remember so many of the teachers, they would take maternity leave and they would come back and just be like, I don't want to be back here. I want to be back at home with my kids. And that really, always like hit me hard. Well, then why don't you? And I understand though that some of them didn't have that choice. So I think there are societal pressures at play here, but I also do think that this is part of the everything's relative, and there are no black and white distinctions between anything. Men and women are different. You cannot overcome that. Okay.
Yeah. And who pushed this idea that women are inferior? It was the feminists back in the 70s, giving the idea that if a woman cannot be a man, she's less than a man, and never, ever accounting for feminine strength, what that actually means, which means in many ways, women are stronger than men, not necessarily physical strength, but in so many other ways. I mean, this goes back to ancient days in the Bible. I mean, it's just part of our nature. They just don't understand it. They don't get it.
Chris made an important point, and I just want to jump in with a little quick comment, which is that the need for two incomes in order to buy a house pushes women into this situation. So when you say, a woman doesn't want to be lorded over by a man or bossed by a man, I can understand that. That makes sense. I don't think I've ever seen it in a real couple, but okay, let's say that that's the case. But then they go into the workforce and they're bossed over and lorded over by people that have no relationship with them whatsoever, that don't have to, live in the same house as they. Isn't it more fulfilling? I think it's clear that even many men would find it more fulfilling to spend more time with their family, instead of being, sort of, I hate to use a word like this, but sort of enslaved to a multinational corporation and live in a cubicle. I don't see how that's much of an improvement. So we always need to look at what's the alternative that you're measuring against. If you're measuring against, being rich, super rich, and living in a boat on off Europe somewhere, that's one thing. But if you're talking about in practical terms, working around the house and raising your children and being around them all the time and being around other neighbors and so forth and things like that, as opposed to living in a cubicle and punching buttons on a computer all day, let's be fair. Let's see what people really want and then let them have it.
Just lastly, I just want to say one thing. The job of a mother to provide a loving, and safe household, there's nothing more important than that. So I don't care if you go and earn $10 million. If you're not doing that, then nothing else matters. And there have been so many studies, and some of these are anecdotal, but women who in their early 40s say, oh, geez, I really regret not having a family and being so career oriented. Because, unlike men, women only have a time frame there that they can have a family.